What's up guys, Luke from 8-Bit Plus back again with another video, and today we're going to be taking apart a PS4, cleaning it, restoring it, and putting it back together the right way, and we're going to do it for you in less than 10 minutes. Maybe. Hopefully. Okay, probably not, but it's a really good clickbait title and it got you here, so while you're here, sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's fix your So before we get started with this refurbishment, I'd like to remind everyone that I'm well trained in video game console repair. I'm not an electric engineer, and I still have a lot to learn, but I'm pretty good at what I do. And I have the reputation and experience of tearing down and refurbishing thousands of consoles for my customers in the past at 8-Bit Plus. So if you're into this type of stuff and you want to learn more, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can catch all of our future videos on the restoration and repair of game consoles, controllers, accessories, and even games, ranging from retro to current gen, in less than 10 minutes. Maybe. So the first thing that we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna go ahead and take our PS4 apart now. This particular model is the cuh-1001a. This is actually the very first model. The early models had soft buttons on the front for the power and the eject. And the first thing that we're gonna do is go ahead and slide that top cover off. It basically hides the hard drive slot. It's very easy to upgrade the hard drive on your system with a few basic tools and a little bit of know-how as far as computers go. But the first thing that we're gonna do is go ahead and take out that hard drive screw, which is a Phillips. That is actually the whole process of pulling out the hard drive. And then you're gonna have 4 other screws that surround the hard drive and kind of hold it into its case. In this case, it looks like the customer actually has already replaced his own hard drive in the past. So whoever this is actually has a little bit of experience taking it down. And it looks like actually the customer, when they put it in, they didn't do the best job of holding into place. So now we're gonna go ahead and switch our bits over to the Torx 8-bit, and this is the main screw bit that is used with tearing down the PS4. So you're gonna mainly be using a Torx 8, a Phillips 1, and a Phillips 0 screw bit with this. So make sure you have those 3 before you get into it. And we're just gonna go around the outer part and start taking all of those Torx 8 bits out. There's actually gonna be 7 Torx 8 screws. While I'm doing this video, I'm actually realizing like, oh yeah, we need to show people organization. But if you're just starting out, I want to show a good example for you guys. I want to make sure I'm not misleading you. Always have some sort of magnetic pad. Some people will use an egg carton, but you know, I always liked using magnetic pads because it holds the screw nice and tight. I've gotten lazy over the years because I know where the screws go, but anytime I'm opening something new, I will always have a magnetic pad. So that's going to be our final Torx 8 screw, at least for that side of the console. Now we're gonna go ahead and move to the back of the console, and in the back there's actually supposed to be 4 little stickers on the left and the right side. The wide ones, those are actually just gonna be black stickers, and then directly in the middle there's supposed to be 2 warranty stickers. It looks like this customer's actually tried to get into their console and repair it themselves before they brought it to us. So you will need to peel those stickers off. And the way that I actually peel those stickers off is I use an X-Acto set. And you may recognize this set from the unboxings that we do. I use them for more than just the unboxings. You can actually pick these up at Walmart. So we did peel that 1 warranty sticker. You're gonna probably have 4 if your console's never been opened. Underneath those stickers is 4 Torx 8-bit screws. They are black screws, so they do look a little bit different. That's kind of a clear identifier as far as, you know, where they're supposed to go. These go on the outside. Now, once we get those T8 screws off, we're gonna wanna slide that other piece loose. And there's a very specific way of opening these guys. I have a large scar on my middle finger that forever reminds me of the wrong way to pull a right top cover off. I'm actually showing it in the camera now. If you follow this guide in any way, make sure you do this part exactly the way that I show you. This is the correct way of taking it off. What you kind of want to do is you're going to put your left hand, you can already kind of lift it up, and then you're going to place your right thumb on that little corner. It's like a platform type of thing, and you're just going to give it a little bit of pressure. On your other hand though, you're going to be lifting it up and out, like applying pressure out, and that thing should pop right off. Now, this is the part where it can be dangerous if you try to force it or do it the wrong way, because there's a sharp piece of metal right there, and you can kind of tell where I cut myself. I actually was holding it on the edge and like applying a ton of pressure and trying to pop it off, and it popped all right, and my finger went right into that metal piece and gouged the hell out of it, and I ended up having to get those stitches. There's a shot of the scar right there. It looks terrible. You know, they did a good job of sewing me up, but I'll never do that again. That was an $800 bill that you do not want. Now we're gonna pull our T8 screw back out, and we're gonna continue to kind of place those in line and do the rest all the way around. I think there is an additional 7 or so, but before we get an exact number, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually taking the console and giving it a good spray down by the air compressor, because it was riddled with dust bunnies. There's no wonder, and I'd actually put money on there's gonna be a ton of dust in the heat sink, and I believe there was. So I got all those dust bunnies off. It's already looking a lot better. We haven't even torn into it yet, but we're gonna go ahead and start tearing down the rest of the top half. Everything on this top half is gonna be Torx. So just make sure you put the Torx bits exactly in reverse where I'm putting them here, and you should be good to go on the reassembly. But what I began to do is kind of keep all the screws from the top half of the PS4 on one mat, and then all the screws, including the outside screws from the other half, on the other magnetic mat. So we have all of our screws, 14 in all, Torx screws at least, off of it now, and then we have the 2 Phillips screws that actually hold the clamp down that clamps to the APU unit. We have those left in so that when we flip our system over, stuff's still intact. It's loose, but it's still intact, so we don't lose anything. Okay, so we're almost ready to go ahead and flip the console over. One last thing though, we gotta disconnect the fan cable. We can actually do this later if we want, but I just decided to go ahead and do it right then. And this is actually pretty important. It's easy to damage this cable or the port that it connects into if you do this incorrectly. So what a lot of people do is they try to pull it outward, because a lot of those cables disconnect outward. But in this case, the cable actually is pulled up. So we're gonna pull that up and swing it outward, and then we can go ahead and flip it over. And since we already did our due diligence and took the 3 exterior screws, that case piece should just elegantly flip up and out. And now we've exposed the bottom side. So now we're gonna start digging into the bottom half, the power supply, and the drive. All right, now we have the console flipped over, and it's time for us to go ahead and start to take the bottom side of it apart. What you're gonna see me do is actually move the 4 exterior screws over to the right pad, just so you can kind of keep track, just for you guys. I'm gonna have the one side with all the 14 Torx screws and the exterior screws on one pad, and then on the other side I'll have the power supply screws, the drive screws, and any other screws that are on the other half. Right now we're currently taking apart the 2 Phillips screws that are holding the power supply down and through to the other side. We're pulling those out. They're really long screws, so you just kind of have to finagle them out. And then there's also 3 Torx screws that are holding the power supply in, but it looks like I'm just doing the Phillips side right now. And that screw that I just turned, you're actually not gonna have to worry about. That's for if you want to get down to the daughter board of the drive and do some working on that. So in this case, we're just gonna leave that screw there, but I am gonna need to go down in size to a Phillips 0 screw because that tiny little screw on the edge there needs to be removed. But after that one is out, that is actually it for Phillips size screws. So we have the 2 that are holding the power supply in on left and right side, and then we have that top small one. And now we're gonna switch back to our trusty old Torx 8-bit screw and begin to start tearing the rest of the console down. Okay, so now we're gonna just continue to pull those Torx screws out. There's actually 3 more that hold the power supply in. So it looks like I'm gonna go ahead and pull those 3 out right now. And now we're gonna go ahead and pull the power supply out. The way that you pull the power supply out is you just kind of wiggle it from both sides. And it should pop right out, but there is 2 little, like, it's like a fork that plugs in to the power supply, so you just gotta kind of wiggle it from both sides and that'll pop right out. And then we just kind of fold it, like we just kind of swing it to the left, and there's another connector that we just grab kind of at the neck, and you're just gonna wiggle that guy out and it should come right off. Remember guys, don't force things when you're taking these apart. You can apply like a little bit of pressure, but if it starts to get like really hard, just do not force it. And if you're nervous, then take it to a professional like me that can repair if they, if there's an issue, we can actually repair any kind of damage that happens, and that very seldomly happens with us in the first place. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the PlayStation 4 drive, and we're gonna continue to take the Torx 8 screws out. This screw actually holds down the drive and the antenna. The antenna is removed pretty easily. It's just a metal piece with a wire soldered onto it, and it just goes down the drive and loops through. So just keep note of where the cable is routing, and when you go to put it back, you won't have any issues. And then where it actually connects to the motherboard, it's kind of like a bottle cap. It is pretty fragile, so you want to be careful here to not bend it too much because it doesn't have a ton of give. You just kind of want to grab it at its neck, just like we did with the power supply ribbon, and just slowly pull it off. And once again, just take your time, guys. Go slow and easy and don't force anything, and you should be able to get it out fine. So now we're gonna go ahead and detach the ribbon cable that connects the DVD drive to the motherboard of the PS4. And this is another one kind of like the ribbon cable that connects the fan. That's a little different than you would expect. Most people actually damage this ribbon cable if they try to repair it themselves before they bring it into us. What you're gonna wanna do is there's actually a little tab that you're gonna go ahead and press down on the ribbon cable, and then you pull the ribbon cable directly outward. But you want to make sure you're pressing down on that metal tab. Now we're gonna kind of feed out the this external power cable that also plugs into the motherboard from the drive. That is also routed a specific way, so make sure you take note. That actually reveals another Torx 8 screw that we're gonna unscrew now, and then we got one last Torx 8 screw that we're gonna take out, and then we should be able to wiggle our drive free. Just before you wiggle the drive out though, just make sure you've disconnected all the ribbon cables. There are quite a few ribbon cables that you're gonna need to make sure you're disconnecting. So the drive should just kind of wiggle out with a little bit of prying with your nail. That should come straight out. So now we're good to go. We're gonna flip it back over and begin to take off that last clamp that actually holds everything on this side back together. All right, guys, now is time to take off the 2 screws that are actually holding down the plate that presses everything and creates pressure against the APU unit on the motherboard. So we're gonna go ahead and grab a Phillips 0 screw for this. I initially thought it was a Phillips 1, but it's actually a step smaller, or at least I had success with the Phillips 0 more so than the 1. And you'll actually see I actually kind of struggle here a little bit, like what's going on, because I was using a little bit too big of a bit. But don't worry, we didn't strip anything. We just kind of had a little bit of a brain fart moment here, and this just kind of goes to show you that even I make mistakes here and there after doing lots of different console teardowns, and probably somewhere in the 50s mark as far as PS4 teardowns. Just don't fret if you start to find that things are, wow, I'm a stubborn one. So if you start to have issues with the screw turning, you may want to just go down one size and screw, or just go up. And kind of a rule of thumb, I mean, while we're talking about this stuff, kind of a rule of thumb of like when you're first doing a teardown, you want to try a bit, and when you put the bit in, just because it fits doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most optimal size. So what I'll do is kind of a wiggle test where I'll wiggle around the bit that I put in, and if it has a lot of play in it, I'll actually go one step up and see if the step up will fit. You always want to do the right sizes to kind of avoid like stripping of the metal or anything like that. So I got away with one there without doing any kind of too much stripping, but you definitely want to double check and do a better job than I did in this case. Also, we want to make sure that our thermal pads all stay together and none of them get blown off. So in this case, we're gonna have actually 8 thermal pads. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna move the thermal pads onto one side. In this case, I put it onto the metal sheet because we actually had more that were connected to that than the motherboard, but you can do it either way. Just make sure you don't lose any of these thermal pads because they are pretty important. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and wiggle the motherboard out. At this point, there's no screws holding it in, so it should just lift up, kind of like you're lifting a hood, and then slide right out, just like that. And it looks like we have one thermal pad missing that's still on the metal shroud. So we're gonna actually take the one that is still on the metal shroud and just put it back onto the motherboard this time. So we're gonna go ahead and clean up the motherboard, get all that like dust off of it, and then we're gonna just get all that old thermal paste on the APU unit all cleaned up, and then get that thing repasted. We're gonna do that in a little bit, but first we're gonna just go ahead and put this motherboard to the side so we can continue with our teardown. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my air compressor, my trusty air compressor I got from Harbor Freight. It's a super quiet one, highly recommend it, by the way. If you guys wanna know more about that, I can tell you in the comments. Great for light work, kind of like what I do in the shop. At this point, I'm just gonna take the whole piece out of shot and go ahead and give it a quick spray down. So we got the motherboard dust bunnies all sprayed off, and we managed to keep all those thermal pads intact by spraying lightly in their area. It looks like this one is ready to be put to the side and then pick back up later when we go into the cleaning of the thermal paste and the repasting. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and take a Phillips 0 screw bit, and we're gonna remove the final remaining screws that are attaching the bottom metal piece along with the heat sink to the chassis itself. So we actually have 3 of those small screws, and these screws are very, very, very similar to the small screw we removed on top of the Blu-ray drive earlier. Just for your personal notes, you can kind of keep track. And as you see, I'm still putting those screws on the other magnetic mat just to keep it all together. And whoa, look at that, ladies and gentlemen. That is why your system is overheating, because the heatsink is completely clogged on this one with dust. So we're gonna do something about that during this refurbishment for sure. The reason why is because that's actually the heatsink that dissipates the heat that's coming off of the chip. So if you actually hear your fan kicking up really loud with a little bit of gameplay on some sort of like sort of graphically intense game like a Call of Duty, for example, if you find that it's getting really loud while playing games like that, it's most likely because of a combination of many things, but mainly because your heatsink is clogged with dust. And in this case, our fan is also caked with dust. And you'll see later I get it nice and cleaned up, and actually I had to go a little bit above and beyond to make that happen. So needless to say, this thing needs some serious cleaning. In the next part, we're gonna go ahead and take the plastic pieces and clean those all off, get all that dust off all of our plastic pieces in the actual wash basin. Okay, so we've actually taken all of our plastic pieces, and you should have a total of 4 plastic pieces that are completely void of any kind of metal. And the easiest way, in my opinion, to clean these is in some sort of a tub or a dishwasher if you want to. The thing about dishwashers is it takes way longer than it should to get these things cleaned up. So when you're like in a high, kind of in a time crunch like I usually am, this is the best way to do it. And the solution that I use to clean is actually Awesome. You can pick up Awesome spray from pretty much any dollar store. And here's a big jug of it that we use, and we'll just kind of dilute it. We'll put like really about the amount that's in the squirt bottle right now, and then we'll dilute the rest with water. And then we'll take a normal Colgate toothbrush and then a separate nylon brush. This was bought at Harbor Freight. Mine's a little worn down because it's been used a lot, but just make sure you use a lot of elbow grease and that Awesome spray. Just use it a liberal amount. This stuff is really cheap. Spray it down really good, and then just put in the extra effort. Put in the extra elbow grease, get in all those cracks and crevices, and take your time on this, because this is kind of an important part of the whole thing. You want to make this look really good. So as you can see, I'm using way more than I probably need to, which is totally fine, and I recommend you do the very same. So get on both sides, make sure you spray on all 4 corners, and then on the inside as well, and then just grab that bigger nylon brush and just really scrub and get all into every single corner and crack and crevice, and get it real good. So now we're gonna I have actually put a kind of a garden hose head onto my sprayer. So I got that thing cranked up pretty high, and a pretty big basin, so like water doesn't get everywhere. It kind of stays in the basin. But you want to make sure you wash those off really good. That's also gonna get into the hard to reach spots that you can't really reach with a brush. We're also going to get into those rear vents, make sure all those rear vents are nice and clean, and just keep in mind this part is kind of an aesthetic type of thing, but it's just good to get in the habit of like cleaning this stuff up, because I know our customers are very happy with our work, and part of it is the presentation that they get back. They're like, wow, this thing looks great, and it's because we put the extra time in it. So now we're gonna move on to the next piece, which is the outer top part of the PS4. This is actually the part where I was telling you guys where I gouged my finger out earlier. This piece can be a little bit tricky when you're starting to dry it, but it's pretty straightforward when you're cleaning it up. Just keep in mind that this one is kind of covered in stickers, so you aren't really able to, or at least I wasn't really able to get into that PS4 engraved logo in the front, but I always like to scrub that PS4 engraved logo that's on the front side of it. It just looks really nice when you put it all back together. So here we're just kind of lightly scrubbing over the stickers, trying to like not damage anything, but at the same time just like get everything nice and clean. And now we're on to our next piece. This is actually the bottom half of the PS4 outer shell. This is a one solid piece. Just kind of spraying all around and rinse and repeat. No pun intended. You want to be careful too when you're scrubbing it. There's a little metal on this bottom half. As long as you get it nice and dry with an air compressor, it's not a big deal. But there is a little tab that I actually just ran over a little bit too rough with my brush, and that actually controls the touch mechanism for the eject button, I believe. So you want to be careful with that one, because if it gets kind of mangled and bent out of shape, your eject button won't work properly. So just keep note and be careful when you're scrubbing around that area. Now comes our final piece, that is the actual cover for the this is the top external plastic piece that covers actually the hard drive slot. And then we're just gonna do kind of a final rinse of everything. I like to rinse them and then put them down into the basin as I rinse and clean the other ones, and then just do a final spray of everything nice and good to get any kind of excess dirt that may have fell or anything like that. So after we're done rinsing these, we're gonna go ahead and shake them out individually and put them onto a couple of microfiber towels. So now we're gonna move on to the drying phase, and what I like to do is lay out a bunch of microfiber cloths onto a table with a heat dish. You don't really need the heat dish, but it's kind of cold in the winter out here in Idaho, so I do have one conveniently on the same table where I dry my stuff. So I'll turn that one up on high, and then I will start to wipe down all of the plastic pieces with a separate microfiber cloth. We're basically on this point, we're just kind of doing a quick wipe down of all the like big surface area stuff. And then the cracks and crevices we'll take care of later with our air compressor. But this is very, very important, guys. You want to make sure that you focus your attention while you're doing all this stuff, the cleaning, the repairing, the refurbishing, and the drying. You want to make sure you're paying attention to the picture in the top right corner of the screen. Yup, that's my boy, JC, Jesus Christ, as you may know him. He changed my life and he will change yours. The man, the King of Kings, the Lord of all Lords, JC, everybody, Jesus Christ. Okay guys, so now we've actually shifted our attention back to the motherboard, and I got this nice tight shot so you guys can actually see the process of getting all the thermal paste off of the APU unit. This chip actually runs your audio and your video, so it's a CPU and a GPU all in one. Needless to say, this is a very important chip. So you want to make sure, first of all, I'm not spraying water. That is not water. That is alcohol spray. It's not going to corrode or anything. That's the reason why you use alcohol spray on electronics, is because it doesn't corrode and it doesn't damage it. Just make sure you're using at least 91%, preferably 99% alcohol. So it doesn't have any water content. 70% will not cut it, and you can actually check on your bottle before you start working on these consoles to make sure that you're using at least 90%. What I do here is I basically just spray, and then I'll wipe it down with like a paper towel or a cloth, and then I'll grab a Q-tip and I'll scrape off those like the chunks, because those are hard to get to with any other tool. So I'll try to scrape those off, and then like I'm using my fingers here, but you could even use like a pair of tweezers and pull off like those bigger chunks, so you don't start smearing it onto the motherboard. This is definitely a messy job, guys. Like, just expect to use a lot of rubbing alcohol and a lot of Q-tips and paper towel or cloths. It's just gonna happen, but we're gonna get it nice and clean, get all that excess like old thermal paste off. That thermal paste is very important. I tell customers a lot of the time, like, after we're done refurbishing your console, it's gonna be better than new. Like, it's not gonna be good as new, it's gonna be better than new. And the reason why is the thermal paste that we use is really, really high quality. I'll show you it here in a second. That's actually what I'm about to show you. Is we actually use Noctua thermal paste. It's really high quality paste. It looks like I actually missed it in the shot. But this is a very high quality thermal paste. Now we're gonna put a decent amount of Noctua thermal paste on the chip. And what this thermal paste does is it kind of acts like a gasket on a car. When you have a good gasket, you're not gonna have any leaks. It's gonna, you know, it's gonna do its job. It's gonna keep the oil or whatever fluid from leaking out. And it's the same thing with game consoles. Thermal paste is a big part of the dissipation of heat from the chip. So if you have bad thermal paste or old worn out thermal paste, you're not going to get as much cooling and dissipation of heat as if you had good fresh thermal paste on it. So we're gonna put this thermal paste on, and we're gonna spread it nice and evenly, so it's evenly coated across it, and there's no like thinner parts. It's all kind of an even thick coat. You could probably get away with using less thermal paste than I'm using here, but I like to do a little bit more than typical, just for that nice quality seal when we do put it all back together. Okay guys, so this part I kind of wanted to show you just in case you begin the process of taking your drive apart, or taking your console apart to get to the drive, and you hadn't ejected the disc that's in it. You don't want to just open it and pull that top tray off, because you're gonna throw some stuff out of whack. So there's actually a manual eject screw. Not a lot of people know this, but there's actually a manual eject screw to the left of the drive, and you can stick a Phillips head. I usually use a Phillips head 1, and if you actually turn that counterclockwise, you will actually eject your disc that's in there, and then you can begin the process of doing the teardown of the drive. Okay guys, so we did actually have a bit of a mishap. For some reason, one of the videos just got corrupted. So I do feel bad. I'm not gonna be able to walk you through this drive part. But I'm gonna try and help you do it anyways. So it's a pretty simple process. There's only gonna be 3 Phillips 0 screws on the outside of the drive. You're gonna take all 3 of those out, and the actual top of the drive is just gonna flip up and out, kind of like when we pulled the motherboard out. It just like comes up at an angle and then slides out, because there is a black notch on the bottom left hand corner that kind of goes over the top of that metal plastic sheet. So when you pull that off, just be very careful, because there's a lot of small like pieces and mechanisms. So just be you know, gentle when you're taking it apart. And then our main goal here is to clean up any kind of dust. So we're gonna just take a Q-tip and a little bit of rubbing alcohol and just clean up all the excess dust, especially on the little rubber drive that like moves the disc in and out. Make sure that's nice and cleaned up with some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, and then dried. And then as far as the laser lens goes, the big lens in the middle, this you want to be extra careful, guys. But if you just take a Q-tip and a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and just lightly, very lightly, just rub the top of the lens with that moistened Q-tip, and then flip that fresh Q-tip over and use the dry side to kind of dry that top piece. You should be good as far as the refurbishment of the drive goes. What I found really with these lenses is you don't actually have to replace them very often unless they're physically damaged. At least I haven't encountered a ton of lens issues. It does happen, and there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, if you're having issues with your drive not reading games, it's most likely due to the amount of dust that's collected inside of the drive. So by doing these couple of steps, you're gonna greatly reduce the amount of dust that's on your lens, and in most cases that will fix the actual problem. Okay guys, so this next part we're actually going to be cleaning the other metal piece. This is where the motherboard lays down onto, and this one has the heatsink attached to it. As you can see, we actually went in and we cleaned out all that dust. So look, you can freely see through the heatsink, so when the fan is trying to blow the hot air out of the back, it'll have it won't be all congested like my nose is right now, and have the ability to breathe freely. So that's a big part of making sure that our PS4 runs cool when we put it back together. We're not completely done yet. We do need to make sure we get that excess thermal paste that was from the old chip or the old paste off of this backside, so that when we press it against the motherboard, it creates a nice new seal with no cracks or anything. So we're gonna go ahead and wipe it down and get it off as good as possible with some paper towel and rubbing alcohol, so that when we put it back together, it's a nice fresh seal. Okay guys, so now we are gonna actually move back to the plastic pieces and the drying process of them. This is the final part where I basically take the air compressor with a good amount of pressure and I start to spray in all the cracks and crevices, and hopefully you're seeing it, but like for example, under that metal shroud, you're seeing the water that's like trapped underneath it, that's connected to the plastic. You're seeing that water begin to come out and just kind of just like spread out across the plastic and then eventually evaporate. This is kind of my quick way of getting the plastic pieces all nice and dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and commence project final dryness. And then also, like, what I did here is I sprayed the plastic and then the water kind of like went out onto a surface area that I can wipe with a microfiber cloth. So I'll just take my microfiber cloth and I'll go ahead and wipe it. And then once again, guys, just make sure with the top and the bottom pieces that you're not mangling that little metal clip, because that does connect the touch power buttons to the outside. So if you find that you put your system back together and your eject and power buttons aren't working anymore, it's probably because that clip got mangled. So you're gonna have to take it apart again and kind of like guesstimate where it was. And it's just not a good time. It's not a good time at all. So just be really careful around that little clip there. Really, this is the same as kind of the cleaning process. It's not rocket science. Just make sure that you don't spray anywhere and water comes out. When you spray and there's water still coming out, just keep spraying and keep wiping until it's completely dry, because it's just very important that you get everything completely dry. Now this next part is kind of important, guys. There's a little acrylic plastic sheet that lays on the top half of the console, and that sends the LED light into a straight line. Like when you power up the PS4, it has like a straight line. So what I usually do, and you don't have to do this, it's just gonna take you more passes with the air compressor at high pressure. But what I'll do is I'll take that acrylic piece off, and it's held down by just double-sided tape. So once again, just be careful, don't bend it too much, and you should be okay. But I like to pull that whole piece off, and then I can dry both sides and spray it off. And it just saves me a little bit of time. So once you got the top and the bottom piece all nice and dry, this is kind of an important part. There is a little notch in the black plastic sheet. When you put that acrylic piece in, you got to make sure you're underneath that notch. And then there's also a little raised circular piece of plastic, like a sphere, that sticks up out of the black plastic. There's also a hole in the acrylic. Just make sure everything slides in and it feels flush. If it doesn't feel flush, you're doing something wrong. As I'm showing here, it's got to be right in the center of that acrylic hole. And what I'm doing here is I'm kind of just like applying pressure to that double-sided tape. In some cases, you might want to just consider replacing that tape, but here it was still sticky enough and good enough for my liking, so I just reused the tape that was there before. And then on this last outer piece, you are going to do the same thing, rinse and repeat. And then I did want to make a quick note. I did record the like inner skeleton part. That part does need to be sprayed off. Probably the most important part of all these plastic pieces. That one needs to be sprayed off and dried as well, and that's probably the most time-consuming one as well. But same type of stuff, guys. Just make sure there's no water. Take your time and spray multiple times with high pressure, and just make sure you don't have any water coming from any like of the cracks and crevices before you start to put everything back together. So that was the complete teardown, cleaning, and restoration of the PS4 model cuh-1001a. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. Also, if you didn't know, I do stream every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday. Link in the description below. I hope to see you there. And last of all, guys, I want to know, have you ever injured yourself trying to do any kind of DIY repairs at home? If so, I'd love to hear your story in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, have an amazing day. God bless, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.